Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's dive in. We begin our review of global economy with the key releases in US, Europe, China, and Japan. U.S. market indices soared to new highs after consumer price inflation eased in April and core consumer price inflation dropped to a three-year low. The weakening of the inflation was enough to drive tech and high-growth stocks higher and stoke speculation that the Federal Reserve may be able to cut interest rates at least twice in the second half of 2024. Investors also overlooked the weak retail sales growth as consumers limited spending to the basics under high food and energy prices and elevated interest rates. In the Eurozone, economic growth picked up slightly in the first quarter to 0.4%, after staying at 0.1% in the previous two quarters. However, market indices in the currency union soared to record highs in the hopes that the European Central Bank would initiate its first interest rate cut in June. In Asia, China's retail sales slowed in April, suggesting weak demand amid ongoing property market worries and job market uncertainty. China's jobless rate declined to 5%, but investors remain skeptical about the reliability of the data. Widespread job losses in the private sector and elevated youth unemployment also factored in. China's fixed investment increased less than expected in April, largely because of the acceleration in the decline in the property market amid a liquidity crunch and a lack of demand. Moreover, floor space sales declined 20% and their value dropped 28% in April, indicating sharply lower demand for residential housing. Other large economies in Asia, such as Japan, reported first quarter GDP contracted at a faster than expected pace of 2%. A large-scale natural disaster at the start of the new year and the production halt at Toyota-controlled Daihatsu Motor also negatively impacted economic activities. In other key economic news around the world, U.S. residential building permits declined to a 4-month low and industrial production fell on the weakness in manufacturing sector. France's jobless rates held steady for the third quarter in a row, but the youth jobless rate hovered at 18%. The UK's unemployment rate was at 4.3% and total pay, including bonuses, rose by a healthy 5.7% in the first quarter. India's inflation dropped to an 11-month low, but stayed near the Reserve Bank of India's upper range for the 11th month in a row. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury hovered below 4.4% after consumer price inflation rose less than expected and traders continued to reassess the future rate path. Crude oil prices fell below $79 a barrel after U.S. crude oil inventories declined more than expected for the second week in a row on larger than expected draws by refineries. Natural gas prices in Europe firmed below 30 euros per megawatt hour as traders looked ahead to the challenges of rebuilding stockpiles for the next winter amid rising demand from Asian markets. The euro edged higher to $1.08 amid worries of diverging rate paths between the U.S. and the euro area. The yen rebounded to 154 against the U.S. dollar as the Bank of Japan continued its bond buying program amid worries about the persistent interest rate differential between the U.S. and Japan. We now shift our attention to major stock markets in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq composite extended gains for the fourth week on the continued expectations of at least 2 rate cuts this year, after consumer price inflation rose less than expected in April. European markets halted a 3-week rally after several policymakers pushed back against the narrative supporting multiple rate cuts in the second half to 2024. The Nikkei 225 stock average extended gains for the fourth week in a row, tracking gains in the U.S. tech stocks despite the larger than expected 2% decline in first quarter GDP in Japan. Hong Kong indices advanced a whopping 4.7% and extended this year's gain to lead world markets after mixed economic reports lifted hopes of more supportive measures from the Chinese authorities. Indian market indices rebounded after falling in the previous 2 weeks in a row as investors reacted to positive corporate results. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings updates from leading companies last week. GameStop traded volatile after video retailer announced weekly quarterly results and launched a secondary offering. Walmart reported better than expected earnings as the discount retailer attracted more customers, strong gains in its e-commerce business, and rising revenue in its online advertising business. Cisco Systems reported better than expected earnings after orders improved and service revenues rose at a faster than anticipated pace. The networking gear market lifted its annual guidance. Networking gear maker lifted its annual guidance. Unilever launched its 1.5 billion euro stock buyback program. The parent company of Cartier and Van Cleef Arpels, Richemont, announced management changes and appointed a new chief executive officer. Swiss Re, Zurich Insurance, and Hanover Re reported better than expected earnings, signaling improving insurance rate in the industry. Vodafone Group launched 500 million euro stock buyback plan. ThyssenKrupp declined 2% after the German steelmaker lowered its annual sales and earnings outlook for the second time in 3 months. ABN AMRO declined after the Dutch bank said its risk capital ratio weakened and the company completed the stock repurchase plan launched earlier in the year. Squarespace agreed to go private in an all-cash deal valued at $6.9 billion. Amazon, Microsoft, GSK, and Pfizer were among the leading companies making large commitments to invest in France during an annual event organized by the French government to attract foreign investment. In the week ahead, investors in the U.S. are looking forward to the release of minutes of the latest policy meeting, durable goods orders, and consumer sentiment index. On the earnings front, investors are looking ahead to the release of earnings from NVIDIA, Palo Alto Networks, Lowe's, Analog Devices, Synopsys, Target, and TJX. In Europe, investors are looking ahead to the release of producer price inflation, the final update on the first quarter GDP, and international trade balance in the euro area. In the UK, investors are awaiting the release of retail sales, inflation, and public sector borrowing data. In Asia, Japan's consumer price inflation, international trade data are also expected. The People's Bank of China is expected to hold loan prime rate steady on Monday, but the central bank may announce supportive measures to clear unsold home inventory. You can review daily U.S. and global financial markets news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on Rodera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance, and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That is all for today, and we will see you next week.